Orient. This is analysis synthesizing all available data into a single coherent map of the territory, a working theory of our options. Decide. This is the point of choice where we determine the best course of action. We cut away the extraneous by making a decision. Act. We execute, acting swiftly and decisively to take advantage of the moment. We then go back to the beginning and observe the effect of our actions, and so the loop continues. Boyd's analysis of dogfights over Korea had shown that the pilots who got inside the OODA loop first were those who survived. To prevail in conflict, Boyd says, we must be able to form mental concepts of observed reality as we perceive it, and be able to change these concepts as reality itself begins to change. Boyd's theories are remarkably similar to those of Alexander Vasilyevich Suvorov, a Russian general born in 1719 who wrote the military manual, The Science of Victory. He believed in Hystrata, playing a fast-paced game, glossometer, making quick decisions that disorient the opposition, natisk, acting aggressively to seize the competitive advantage. That is, move rapidly into a commanding position, assess your unfolding options quickly and clearly, attack with absolute and ruthless commitment, assess, adjust, and repeat. Or, as all the blacks would put it, go for the gap. For Boyd, Suvorov, and the All Blacks, adaptation is not a reaction but a systematic series of actions. It isn't just reacting to what's happening in the moment. It is being the agent of change. This is achieved through a structured feedback loop by building the adaptive process into the very way we lead. How does this work in practice? Kevin Roberts, CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi, talks about 100-day plans. Getting started is deceptively simple. First, list around 10 things you need to achieve over the next 100 days. Start each plan with an action verb and use no more than 3 words each. Make sure each action is measurable and that each one is a stretch. You'll know when something is a real stretch and when you're just creating a list with things you can tick off. Review your list every Friday morning. When the 100 days comes around, the goal is to have each item checked off. All you need to do is get a sheet of A4 paper and get started. Whereas once 50% of his time was spent on assessment, he explains it, and 20% on execution. Today, all information is instantaneous. Consequently, 70% of his time and that of the company's other leaders is now spent on execution. A committed All Blacks fan, Roberts, who was born in Britain and made his home in New Zealand, was instrumental as head of Saatchi & Saatchi, Wellington, in developing the All Blacks brand in the professional era. When asked what he's learned from the All Blacks and how they inspire him, he answers, it's about going for the gap. It's about adapting quickly to change by creating an adaptive culture. In 2004, the All Blacks faced a precipice, with results declining, key players threatening to leave, and cultural dysfunction endemic. The management had to act and act quickly. And his report to New Zealand Rugby Union at the end of the year, as recounted Bob Howitt's final word, Graham Henry identified his key areas of focus. Sufficient leadership, knowledge, and confidence to implement the game plan. The transference of leadership and therefore responsibility from the coaches to the players. The development of leadership ability and composure. The necessity for the group to understand their identity, who they are, what they stand for, and their collective and individual responsibilities as All Blacks. The following chapters outline the actions the leadership took to turn their vision into action, and the 15 key lessons we can learn and apply to our own particular field of play. so that we too can go for the gap. Go for the gap. Momentum swings faster than we think. One moment we're on top of the world, the next falling off the other side. The role of the leader is to know when to reinvent and how to do it. The sigmoid curve means that when we're at the top of the game, it's time to change our game. The key is not losing momentum. As the military have discovered, the best form of attack is a continuous feedback loop, and as we know from Kaizen, this process is best when it involves your people. The teams that will thrive in this VUCA world are those who act quickly and decisively to seize competitive advantage, adjusting and readjusting along the way. You either adapt or you lose, and sustainable competitive advantage is achieved by the development of a continuously self-adjusting culture. Adaptation is not a reaction but continual action, so plan to respond. Go for the gap. When you're on top of your game, change your game. Aoria te tuatara kaputa kiwabu. When poked at with a stick, the tuatara will emerge. A problem is solved by continuing to find solutions. Chapter 3. Purpose. Iranga da matawa Haiti. Barangi da matawa Hanoi. The person with a narrow vision sees a narrow horizon. The person with a wide vision sees a wide horizon. Play with purpose. Ask why. New Zealand Rugby Union Headquarters, Wellington, 2004. Soon after that long, painful flight back from South Africa landed, 8 men found a small meeting room in the headquarters of the NZRU and sat down to fix this thing. In the room were Henry, his assistants Smith and Hansen, Anoka, the mental skills coach Darren Shan, the team manager Brian LaCour, former captain, coach, and team manager, All Blacks captain Tana Umaga, and his then vice captain Richie McCaw. The meeting was to last 3 days. Graham Henry describes it as the most important conversation of his All Blacks career. It would result in the complete overhaul of the most successful sporting culture in human history. The key insights came from the old warhorse Brian LaCour, pondering the strategic objective to create an environment that would stimulate the players and make them want to take part in it. He came up with the 6 words that would define the efforts of the next 8 or so years. Better people make better All Blacks. That is, by developing the individual players and giving them the tools, skills, and character that they needed to contribute beyond the rugby field, they would also, in theory, develop the tools, skills, and character to contribute more effectively on it. The Kiwi Kaizen was a focus on personal development, both as human beings and as professional sportsmen, so that they had the character, composure, and people skills to be leaders, both on and off the field. The challenge was to make this work in practice. There was no blueprint, says Graham Henry. You couldn't just look it up on the internet. How they managed it and turned their vision into action provides invaluable insight for business leaders looking to affect culture change that delivers sustainable competitive advantage. In many ways, the story begins back in 1997 in the pretty provincial city of Christchurch, nestled in earthquake country on the edge of the Canterbury Plains. This cathedral city is the crucible of New Zealand rugby, in the heart of this particular All Blacks team. Most of the men in that 3-day meeting in Wellington in 2004 had a strong connection to the Canterbury Crusaders, including Henry, Smith, and McCaw, the current Crusaders captain. Back in 1997, right at the beginning of professionalism, the Crusaders were just starting out, and it hadn't started well. As Wayne Smith says, the problem was that there wasn't an existing culture. The new franchise had yet to win the hearts of the locals. It was made up of players from all over the country, diluting any local allegiance, and was suffering an identity crisis. We all bought into an idea of trying to create our own culture, says Smith. And to do that, we used storytelling. We had to put forward stuff that inspired us and that inspired the players. He says, I really wanted the campaign to be vision-driven and values-based. He adds, if you're going to set goals, got to set goals. If you're going to be vision-driven and values-based, they have got to be a huge part of setting that. Smith says whether it's family, whether it's legacy, whether it's enhancing the jersey, whatever, you need to identify what it is that gives the players purpose so that you remain driven. He adds, it's about purpose and personal meaning. Those are the two big things. The more you have to play for, Gilbert Anoka summarizes, the better you play. To turn their vision into something that the players could identify with, they needed a theme. The first came from Shakespeare's Henry V, for he today who sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. We want to establish what a Crusader man would look like. What would drive him, says Smith. It took a couple of weeks really to make sure that everyone bought into what we came up with, what the players came up with. The Crusaders had lost the first season of Super Rugby after Smith and Anoka's intervention during 1997. They won the competition in 1998 and another 6 times over the next decade. They are the most successful outfit in Super Rugby history. They became, in Anoka's phrase, the being of team. The emotional glue of any culture, religion, nation, or team is its sense of identity and purpose, says Owen Eastwood. What we identify with are the things we recognize as important to ourselves, to our deepest values. This kind of meaning has the emotional power to shape behavior. This connection of personal meaning to public purpose is something the All Blacks focus on, almost obsessively. It's about what you bring today, says Anoka, and how you're going to fill that jersey. Personal meaning is the way we connect to a wider team purpose. If our values and beliefs are aligned with the values and beliefs of the organization, then we will work harder towards its success. If not, our individual motivation and purpose will suffer, and so will the organization. Good leaders understand this and work hard to create a sense of connection, collaboration, and communion. Purpose relates to an overarching goal beyond the practical missions that are pursued day in, day out, writes Eastwood. This drives the individual's intrinsic motivation and gives a reason to belong, and a reason to sacrifice. The subject of identity is so big in organizational culture, of course, that brand consultancies, advertising agencies, and engagement specialists all vie for the opportunity to define and deliver it. In this space, business strategy, vision, values, and purpose conjoin with corporate identity, design, advertising, and communications to deliver powerful shifts of mindset and behaviors within teams and organizations. It begins from the inside out. As New York Times columnist Daniel Pink explains in his book Drive, humans by their nature seek purpose, a cause greater and more enduring than themselves. The most convincing arguments for his theories are the simplest to understand. We leave well-paying jobs for purpose-driven ones. We volunteer. We have children. Pink argues that purpose maximization is taking its place alongside profit maximization as an aspiration and a guiding principle for businesses around the world. His work reflects the Hawthorne effect, the idea that emotional reward is more important than material compensation, that intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivation rules the world. This aligns with Abraham Maslow and his famous hierarchy of needs. Maslow thought that once beyond the satisfaction and security of your basic needs, safety, food, water, shelter, warmth, comfort, you're no longer driven by purely extrinsic motivations and continue your attention to deeper needs. The first, a sense of belonging and love, a partner, a family. From then on, life becomes about esteem, self-respect, the respect of others, recognition for our talent, our capabilities, our behaviors. In Maslow's world, We all move towards a sense of self-actualization, that is, a psychological state of presence, flow, self-respect, self-expression, and authenticity. This also aligns with the work of psychotherapist Viktor Frankl, who, in Man's Search for Meaning, cites research from Johns Hopkins University, asked what they considered very important to them now. 16% checked making a lot of money. 78% said their first goal was finding a meaning and purpose to my life. What man actually needs, argues Frankl, is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, a freely chosen task. Being human always points and is directed to something or someone other than oneself. He writes, the more one forgets himself by giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love, the more human he is, and the more he actualizes himself. Self-actualization, he concludes, is possible only as a side effect of self-transcendence, of getting over yourself, of sweeping the sheds, and it begins with the question, why? According to Walter Isaacson, in his book Steve Jobs, the Apple founder, once told his team, the work 50 people are doing here is going to send a ripple right through the universe. He later said the goal was never to beat the competition or to make a lot of money. It was to do the greatest thing possible, or even a little greater. It was the purpose, the passion, and the products that mattered and made ripples. While the profits followed in great waves, you should never start a company with the goal of getting rich. Mike Markulu, Apple's employees number 3, had told Jobs, your goal should be making something you believe in and making a company that will last. In another example, Howard Schultz of Starbucks began his company with a singular, some might say altruistic purpose, to create a company where health cover for employees was standard. Fueled by memories of his father struggling through a succession of low-paid jobs with no health care, that was his purpose above and beyond selling coffee. He sees this as the fundamental cause of his success. People want to be part of something larger than themselves. They want to be part of something they're really proud of, that they'll fight for, sacrifice for, that they trust. Saatchi wants to make the world a better place for everyone. Ford wants to democratize the automobile. Disney brings smiles to the faces of children. Nike empowers the individual. P&G are on a relentless quest to be the best. While for Toyota, there is always a better way. Barcelona FC, meanwhile, is driven by perhaps the most motivating purpose of them all. They play for Catalonia. They play for freedom. Jim Collins in Good to Great describes this as the extra dimension, a guiding philosophy that consists of core values and a core purpose beyond just making money. He believes that when authentic and rigorously adhered to, a dramatic, compelling purpose is a fundamental driver of the companies that go from good to great. Reason leads to conclusions. Canadian neurologist Donald Colney says emotion leads to action. If you want higher performance, begin with a higher purpose. Begin by asking why. As well as Graham Henry, there is another TED, the famous series of annual seminars that video presentations described on its internet site as ideas worth sharing. One of the most watched videos on the TED or TED site is a presentation by Simon Sinek, author of Start With Why, who expresses what most of us innately know. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. He argues that because of the limbic, a nerve center buried deep within the pre-linguistic core of our brain, the way we feel about something is more important than what we think about it. That when given a choice, we follow our gut. Sinek told an audience at the United States Air Force Weapons School, what I'm interested in is what gets people up every single day to do this something, maybe pay a premium, maybe suffer inconvenience, maybe sacrifice because they're driven by something else. What is that thing? What I've learned is it's that question, why it has a biological imperative. It drives us. It inspires us. He argues that inspired leaders in organizations, regardless of their size and industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. After all, he says in his TED speech, Martin Luther King gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. If you hire people who believe what you believe, they'll work for you with blood, sweat, and tears. As Nietzsche said, he who has a why to live for can beat anybody almost anyhow. It's at the core of the vision, a value-based mindset. When Owen Eastwood began working with the Proteas, the South African cricket team, the side was languishing at a number 4 in the world rankings. Psychologically, they had lost their way. In a collaborative process involving players, coaches, management, and even a cross-section of the non-playing public, Eastwood helped the team rediscover a word from the Bantu languages, Ubuntu. It has now become the central organizing thought for the team, its reason for being, its reason why. Ubuntu is the essence of being human, says Bishop Desmond Tutu. Ubuntu speaks particularly about the fact that you can't exist as a human being in isolation. It speaks about our interconnectedness. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not have self-interest, said Nelson Mandela in an interview with journalist Tim Modesi. But are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? These are the important things in life. Ubuntu means we send our ripples from us into the wider community. Our actions affect everyone, not just us. The Proteas embrace this ripple effect and the inspiration they have on the whole of South Africa, and it lifts them. They play for something greater than themselves. Meanwhile, years after Smith and Anoka moved on, the Crusaders' vision is still tangibly expressed in their strategy room. In The Real McGaw, an author, Greg McGee, describes how one wall is dominated by a gray polystyrene archway of Corinthian columns, plinths, gables, and foundation stones. It looks like a Walt Disney version of a Greek temple. At the base are foundation stones with words written on them. Team first is at the center, surrounded by the Crusaders' other fundamental values: loyalty, integrity, respect, work ethic, and enjoyment. Across the central plinth is one word: excellence, the ultimate aim. Connecting the foundation with the apex is a series of columns, each of which has a title. Nutrition, physical, technical, practical, teamness, and mental. It is these 6 pillars upon which excellence and success is built. It's funny how often, if the team's not going well, McGaw says, you look at those foundation stones and find the reason in there somewhere. It's easy to be cynical, but there is a little doubt It's easy to be cynical, but there is little doubt this stuff works. Just as the Crusaders under Smith went on to dominate Super Rugby, the Proteas found success through the self-discovery of a common purpose. On 28 August 2012, with Ubuntu as their mantra, they became the first team to be world number 1 in all 3 formats of the game. Similarly, Graham Henry's All Blacks, after their inauspicious start and by consistent application of storytelling techniques, a devolved leadership strategy, the creation of a learning environment, and a focus on the mind game, completed his reign with a winning record of 86% and a Rugby World Cup. So if the key strategic driver was better people make better All Blacks, what is their fundamental purpose? What is the why? Officially, according to the NZRU literature, it is to unite and inspire New Zealand, but it goes deeper than that. We're lucky in that we have a huge history which is motivational to the current team, says Graham Henry. It's usually important to the current guys who carry the responsibility because their job is to add to the legacy. To add to the legacy. There's a rich tradition of players who have had that stewardship, says Wayne Smith, to enhance the jersey and pass it on in a better state than what it was when you got it. As former All Black Ali Williams put it, you have to leave the jersey in a better place. All I was doing, says legendary former All Blacks captain Sean Fitzpatrick, was trying to make it a better team to pass on to the next generation. And in saying that, he continues, the underlying word would be winning. We have to continue that legacy. They have to play a bigger game. Back in the small room in Wellington in 2004, the heroes of the story were still a long way from leaving either the jersey or the statistics in a better place. According to Graham Henry, it wasn't until the All Blacks played France in Paris at the end of that year's European tour that the first glimmers of hope began to show. On that day, the All Blacks scored 5 tries to none, demolishing the French 45-6. For the first time, this group of All Blacks showed what they were capable of achieving, what was inside them. Upon his return from Europe, Bob Howitt records, in final word, Henry wrote his report to the NZRU. Contributing to this success was the implementation of a leadership group. The players gained a great understanding and respect for each other as they developed. They grew to understand that they had similar challenges as international rugby players, and these challenges were better handled collectively than individually. This brought togetherness. They were one. They went to war for each other. My army won because they knew what they were fighting for, said Oliver Cromwell, and loved what they knew. For a warrior tribe from New Zealand, it was the beginning of the being of team. Play with purpose. Our fundamental human drive comes from within, from intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivations. Leaders who harness the power of purpose have the ability to galvanize a group, aligning its behaviors to the strategic pillars of the enterprise. Using vivid storytelling techniques, including themes, symbols, imagery, rituals, mantras, and metaphor, and bringing them to life with imagination and flair, leaders create a sense of inclusion, connectedness, and unity, a truly collective, collaborative mindset. It begins by asking why. Why are we doing this? Why am I sacrificing myself for this project? What is the higher purpose? The answers to these questions have the ability to transform the fortunes of a group or enterprise, activating individuals, providing a cultural glue, guiding behaviors, and creating an overall sense of purpose and personal connection. It is the beginning of the being of team. Play with purpose. Ask why. Wahia te iti kaburangi. Kite tuabu koe mi be moanga teti. Seek the treasure you value most dearly. If you bow your head, let it be to a lofty mountain. Chapter 4. Responsibility. Are takamua takamuri kawa ewai. Be a leader, not a follower. Pass the ball. Leaders create leaders.